You misunderstood. The Catcher in the Rye. What if the biggest battle in your life wasn't against the world, but against growing up? The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger follows Holden Caulfield, a teenager who has just been expelled from school and decides to disappear into New York City for a few days. But this isn't just a story about rebellion, it's about someone who feels completely lost in a world he doesn't trust. Holden believes that almost everyone around him is phony. He rejects society, avoids responsibility, and tries to escape reality. But beneath that anger is something deeper: grief, loneliness, and a desperate need to protect something pure. The real question is Holden running away from the world, or from himself? The novel begins with Holden Caulfield narrating his story from a mental health facility. He doesn't immediately explain why he's there, but promises to tell what happened. Holden has just been expelled from Pensy Prep, yet another elite school he has failed out of. Instead of waiting to go home and face his parents, he decides to leave early. Before departing, he reflects on the people around him, especially his roommate Stradlater, whom he both admires and resents. A key moment occurs when Holden agrees to write an essay for Stradlater. Instead of following instructions, he writes about his deceased brother Ali's baseball glove. When Stradlater criticizes it, Holden becomes furious. The situation escalates into a physical fight, revealing Holden's emotional instability. After leaving school, Holden travels to New York City and checks into a hotel. From here, the novel becomes a series of encounters that highlight his isolation. He watches strangers through his window but feels disconnected. He attempts to flirt with older women but fails. He hires a prostitute but ends up only wanting to talk, showing that what he truly craves is connection, not physical intimacy. Throughout these experiences, Holden constantly judges others while also revealing his own insecurities. He reaches out to people he knows, a former girlfriend, old friends, but these interactions only deepen his sense of alienation. One of the most important elements of the story is Holden's relationship with his younger sister, Phoebe. She represents everything he values: honesty, innocence, and authenticity. When Holden finally sneaks home to see her, their conversation becomes a turning point. Phoebe challenges him directly, asking a simple but devastating question: "What do you actually like?" Holden struggles to answer. Instead, he shares his fantasy of being the Catcher in the Rye, someone who stands in a field and saves children from falling off a cliff. This reveals his deep desire to protect innocence and prevent the pain of growing up. Later, Holden decides to run away and start a new life. But when Phoebe insists on coming with him, he realizes the consequences of his actions. In the final scene, Holden takes Phoebe to a carousel. As he watches her ride in the rain, something shifts inside him. For the first time, he lets go of control and simply allows her to experience life. The story ends ambiguously, with Holden hinting at recovery, but leaving his future uncertain. To truly understand The Catcher in the Rye, you have to look beyond the surface story of a rebellious teenager wandering through New York. This is not just a coming-of-age story, it is a psychological portrait of someone caught between two worlds, childhood and adulthood. At its core, the novel explores the fear of change. Holden doesn't just dislike adults, he fears what adulthood represents. To him, growing up means losing authenticity, becoming fake, and abandoning everything that feels real. When he calls people phony, he isn't just criticizing them, he's expressing his terror of becoming like them. But here's the deeper layer: Holden's rejection of adulthood is also a defense mechanism. He is dealing with unresolved trauma, especially the death of his younger brother Ali. Ali represents a version of the world that was pure and untouched by pain. By holding on to this idea of innocence, Holden avoids confronting the reality of loss. In this sense, his entire worldview is built on denial. Another key meaning of the novel is the illusion of control. Holden wants to save children from growing up. His fantasy of being the Catcher in the Rye is powerful, but also impossible. It reflects a universal human desire: to stop time, to protect what we love, to avoid change. But life doesn't work that way. The novel suggests that growth is not something to be prevented, it's something to be accepted. Holden's journey is not about fixing the world, but about understanding that imperfection and change are part of being human. There's also a strong theme of identity. Holden is in a transitional phase where he no longer belongs to childhood, but cannot yet function in adulthood. This creates a sense of emptiness. He tries on different roles throughout the story, pretending to be older, acting more confident than he feels, but none of them fit. This reflects a deeper truth: identity is not something you instantly discover, it's something you gradually build, often through confusion and failure. Finally, the novel is deeply connected to mental health. Holden's behavior, his mood swings, isolation, impulsiveness, and negative thinking, suggests that he is struggling with depression and possibly trauma-related issues. His journey through New York can be seen as both a physical and emotional breakdown. The meaning of the story, then, is not just about growing up, but about surviving that process. It's about learning that the world is imperfect, that people are flawed, and that innocence cannot last forever, but still choosing to keep going.
If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow.
Major themes, deep analysis. 1. Alienation as self-protection. Holden constantly isolates himself, but this isn't because he truly wants to be alone. In fact, he repeatedly seeks out human connection. The contradiction is important. His loneliness is self-created. He pushes people away before they can reject or disappoint him. This behavior reflects a deeper psychological pattern. When someone has experienced loss or emotional pain, they may avoid closeness to protect themselves. Holden's alienation is not just a theme, it's a coping mechanism. 2. The myth of innocence. Holden idealizes childhood as a perfect state of honesty and purity. But this idea is somewhat unrealistic. Children are not purely innocent, they are simply less aware of the complexities of the world. Holden's obsession with protecting innocence is actually about preserving a version of reality that no longer exists for him. It's less about children, and more about his inability to accept his own growth. 3. The fear of adulthood. Adulthood in the novel is associated with responsibility, compromise, and social performance. Holden sees adults as fake because they follow rules and expectations. But what he doesn't understand is that some level of performance is necessary for society to function. This creates a key tension: is Holden wrong about the world, or just unwilling to accept it? The novel doesn't give a simple answer. Instead, it suggests that both authenticity and adaptation are necessary. 4. Grief and emotional suppression. Allie's death is the emotional core of the novel. Holden rarely talks about it directly, but it influences everything he does. His anger, sadness, and confusion are all connected to unresolved grief. Instead of processing his emotions, he avoids them, through distraction, movement, and criticism of others. This avoidance prevents him from healing. Characters and their deeper meaning. Holden Caulfield. Holden is not just a rebellious teenager, he is a symbol of psychological conflict. He represents the moment in life when certainty disappears. When childhood beliefs no longer make sense, but adult understanding hasn't fully formed. His contradictions, wanting connection but rejecting people, seeking truth but lying frequently, make him deeply human. Phoebe Caulfield. Phoebe is more than just a symbol of innocence, she represents emotional intelligence. Unlike Holden, she sees the world clearly but doesn't reject it. She accepts reality while still maintaining kindness and authenticity. She acts as a mirror for Holden, forcing him to confront his own behavior. Allie Caulfield. Allie represents frozen perfection. Because he died young, he remains untouched by the flaws of adulthood. In Holden's mind, Allie becomes an ideal, something that cannot be changed or corrupted. This makes it even harder for Holden to accept the real, imperfect world. Symbols, deeper interpretation. The red hunting hat. The hat is not just about individuality, it's about emotional safety. Holden wears it when he feels vulnerable, using it as a psychological shield. It allows him to feel unique, but also isolates him further from others. The ducks in Central Park. Holden's question about the ducks, where they go in winter, is actually about survival and change. He is asking, what happens when things disappear? Where do they go? Do they come back? This reflects his fear of loss and uncertainty. The carousel. The carousel is one of the most important symbols in the novel. Unlike Holden's fantasy of preventing children from falling, the carousel allows them to take risks. They might fall, but that's part of the experience. This symbolizes a major shift in Holden's thinking: growth requires risk. What actually happens? Holden watches Phoebe riding a carousel in the rain. As she reaches for the gold ring, he feels genuinely happy, something rare for him. He doesn't try to stop her. He doesn't interfere. He simply watches. Why it happens? This moment represents acceptance. For the first time, Holden understands that he cannot, and should not, control everything. People need to take risks, make mistakes, and grow. What the ending means. Interpretation 1, Emotional growth. Holden begins to move toward healing. He accepts change and lets go of his need to protect innocence at all costs. Interpretation 2, A fragile hope. The ending is not a complete resolution. Holden is still struggling, still uncertain. But there is a sense that recovery is possible. Quote 1. Don't ever tell anybody anything. If you do, you start missing everybody. Meaning. This reflects Holden's fear of connection. Relationships bring meaning, but also pain. Quote 2. I keep picturing all these little kids playing some game in this big field of rye. Meaning. This is the core metaphor of the novel. It represents Holden's desire to protect innocence, but also his inability to accept reality. Quote 3. The best thing, though, in that museum was that everything always stayed right where it was. Meaning. Holden longs for stability and permanence. The museum represents a world that doesn't change, unlike real life. Quote 4. What I have to do, I have to catch everybody if they start to go over the cliff? Meaning. This quote reveals Holden's mission, but also its impossibility. It highlights the central conflict of the novel. Final thoughts. The Catcher in the Rye is not just a story about a teenager, it's a story about what it feels like to lose certainty, to question everything, and to struggle with change. It shows that growing up is not a clean or simple process. It's messy, painful, and often confusing. But it's also necessary. And sometimes, the most important step forward is learning to let go.
Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more exciting discoveries.